The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'll make a motion to enter into the committee meeting. Mrs. Montevillo, I'll take a second. Mr. Johnson, all in favor? Thank you. I'd like to remind you that Mrs. Montevillo is chair of our budget committee. And would you like to begin the report?
I'd be very happy to, Harrison. So I'm going to take the walk over to the podium here. Okay. And here we go. Okay, so good evening, everybody. Mr. Oh, thank you. Okay, let's go to that where you put this kind of stuff in my hand. Okay. I don't know, it's the side button right there. Okay, let me try side button. Nope. Yeah, we'll advance the slide. Yeah. Okay, good evening, everybody. And so this is a big night tonight. We have a lot of important information. We're going to talk about the program requests. We're also going to talk about the staffing requests. Really, when you take a look at tonight, tonight's an important night because we are in people business. People deliver the service of education. And so in delivering the service of education, this is where we invest in our students and in our staff. So if you have questions, please email them to this email address at communications@ncolony.org. That could be for our in-person audience, but primarily for our audience on the live stream. So let's go to the first slide where we have mission focused budgeting. I'm sorry, before that we have the agenda. So it's probably good to start with what you're going to do for the evening. So when we take a look at this, the agenda for the evening is we'll talk about the mission and the pillars because they are the foundation for the work we do. We'll also talk this evening about new programs and initiatives. So you'll see multiple speakers. You'll see me, you'll see Ms. Steele, but you'll see our staff here in the instructional side who have done a lot of great things here to bring these programs forward to you. We'll talk about the federal grant funding. These are the 3 federal grants streams that North Colony has received, how we use that funding. We'll talk about what the enrollment looks like for the upcoming year, and we'll have new staffing requests. And at the end, we'll have a wrap up the summary and take a little bit of a snapshot at how the budget is shaping out and where we're headed with that. So let's go to the first slide here. And as you all know, we always leave this off because this really is the grounding for what we do in North Colony. It's our mission. Again, I think tonight is really very important to know that we look at meeting the needs of each and every child completely, socially and emotionally and academically, and also that we do recognize the fact that it is a people's business. So we look to provide collective capacity to provide the quality education for all. So let's go to the next slide, please. When we look at our 3 pillars. They are academic excellence, equity, and social emotional health. So we continue to guide our work through these lenses. They're not separate. And I think what's the one thread, or if you take a look at the single bar that runs through that, it really is equity. How do we provide equity in all of our experiences for students in North Colony? So let's go to the next slide. And for that, I would be happy to introduce Kathleen Steele, who is our Deputy Superintendent, to talk about some of the shifts that we will be discussing here. So Ms. Steele.
Good evening, everyone. So as we are are looking at our budget and looking to move forward and hopefully move beyond. We hope the pandemic, we've been thinking about how do we come back better. That's what we've been talking about since the beginning. How do we rebuild and how do we create an even better program for our students? So in terms of the 3 pillars, in terms of academics, we've been spending a lot of time thinking about what deeper thinking and learning looks like and how we help students. We're way beyond the time of factual recall, we know that, to do deeper work, more creative work that involves more critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving. So you'll hear that in some of the new program requests tonight. How do they also do authentic work? How do they do work that isn't isolated, siloed, just to get a certain score on a test? But how do they do work that has meaning, that is relevant, that makes sense, that goes along with disciplinary thinking? How do students have more agency and personalization? We're always trying to differentiate, we're always trying to meet the needs of our students. And then obviously through the pandemic, there has been an infusion of instructional technology. And how do we do that, not just for the bells and whistles that we know technology can provide, but to really facilitate collaborative learning, and how do we also use it to break down the barriers and connect to a world that's larger than the classrooms. Okay, thank you. Our second pillar is social emotional shifts. So we have been working on a mission statement about social emotional and academic learning because we have always been a district that values the whole child. It is in our mission statement. It's not enough to just have students who score really well on tests. We are trying to help students to be successful in life. And so we are looking at how we build connections and relationships by acquiring and applying skills and attitudes to develop healthy identities, to manage their emotions and achieve personal and collective goals, to feel and show empathy for others, to establish and maintain supportive relationships, and to make responsible and caring decisions. We had a character ed program in this district long before it was mandated by the state of New York. This is something we've always been committed to, and as we now think about what are the shifts then, one of the things we want to talk about is how are we thinking more systemically? So a lot of times when we think about social emotional needs, we think about additional staff, more counselors, more social workers, more psychologists, all of which are important. But we also want to think about how are all those pieces working together. Think about the metaphor of an airline traffic controller who's making sure all the pieces are going in the right direction. So we have a district K through 12 mental health team established. We have now started building-based mental health teams. We have behavioral support teams, and we are working on connecting our schools with community supports. That's not particularly easy these days because there are not a lot of mental health providers out there, and they're all very overwhelmed. So we're looking as a school system as how do we build these networks within our school district so we can connect our students as much as possible when they need additional supports. The other big piece is thinking about reactive practices. We've all been reacting to the pandemic, obviously, and we've talked about, I'm sure you've heard on the news, I'm sure you've seen the studies, there is a problem with student emotional, mental health, well-being. There's probably an issue for everyone. We've just been through a collective trauma as a nation, as a world. So what we are doing is we are looking for a district. We are working on right now a social emotional learning approach and a curriculum that's culturally competent and evidence-based, because this is a time where all hands need to be on deck. We all need to be supporting our students, and so we want to have the right material so that people can do that well. We have just started building-based culture teams, because the culture, the feel of a building, whether a student feels like I belong here, somebody knows me here, people get me here, I'm seen and heard here. So to look at how are we doing that well in each of our buildings, so that this isn't just about counseling, this is about how it feels every day for every kid. We all went to school and have bad days, right? So how does it feel every day, and how do we help kids when they're just having this typical struggles of growing up? And then how do we help them when they're having more significant struggles? We are looking at adding health and wellness spaces for students to access beyond counseling offices. They don't always need to see a counselor, but they may need a break in their day. Walking through the halls is not necessarily the best way for them to get a break in their day. So how can we do that? We're thinking about schedules that will allow for student and staff well-being. So this is something that we want to plan into the future. Is there anything that's under our control that we could do differently so that the adults who serve our students and the students who go to school here for an education, that we're treating them in a more humane way? We all know that we feel like we are moving all the time. Is there a way to have a slower, kinder, gentler approach? And then how are we continuing to raise awareness for faculty, families, and communities regarding both mental health issues and then also the aligned training? Because we're seeing our students and we want to move to more proactive so that we're not always on the crisis end of it, but we're doing as much as we can to prevent any situations where a student would feel as though they don't belong here and they don't have a home here in North College. Which I guess to think about equity, Mr. Porter alluded to this earlier. You know, we've always said our three pillars are academic excellence, social emotional health, and equity. And one of the things we've been talking a lot about is perhaps we've falsely named equity as a separate pillar. Maybe it doesn't exist over here out there on its own, but maybe it is actually the foundation upon which all the other pillars are grounded. Because if we are providing excellent academic programming, if we are meeting students' social emotional needs, then we are doing the best by our students and giving them what they need, which is at the heart of equity. So maybe equity doesn't sit out here alone. Maybe equity informs all our decisions when we're thinking about new programs, when we're thinking about supports we put in place for all of our students. Similarly, we are also thinking about how do we think about equity in a proactive stance. We all hear stories on the news where things have happened, where students have been bullied because of their religion, because of their race, because of any number of things, and then people have to respond. We will always do that. But we also want to continue to say, how do we always examine our practices to make sure that we're doing everything possible so that those things don't happen in the first place? That kids say, this is a school where that doesn't happen to kids here. We don't do those kinds of things here. That's not who we are. That's the culture we're trying to create. So those building culture teams, that's part of what they're working on. We're doing student circles and student surveys in the middle school and the high school to get a sense of what does it feel like to be a student here? As adults, we all think we know, but we're not the kids, and they're our customers. So how are they feeling, and are we taking care of them in the ways that we need to? We've used our superintendent's conference days this year and building-based work to work on the tenets of the New York State Culturally Responsive and Sustained Framework. We should remember, Pillar 1 is a welcoming and affirming environment for all students. Every child who comes across a doorway in North Colony should feel welcome, should feel seen, should feel heard, and should feel valued. And how do we do everything possible to make sure that they all feel that way? So if you can keep those shifts in mind, we're going to talk a little bit about new program requests. And these are new things that we're adding. Some have budget implications, some do not, but there are things we're very excited about. Again, Mr. Lepore alluded to those earlier. So we'll hear from Nick Bernardo, our mathematics supervisor. We'll hear from Keith Bogert, our science supervisor. Mr. Calero unfortunately couldn't be here. This meeting was going to be Monday. He was going to be here Monday. He couldn't be here, so Mr. Cord is going to talk about social studies, which I'm sure will pain him tremendously. And Mr. Stein, our athletic director, will talk about athletics. So I'm going to have Julie pull up the slide, and Nick, you want to come down and talk a little bit about your math programs?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for having me. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is we're looking to create a new accelerated math pathway for grades 6 to 8. Currently, right now in the North County School District, we accelerate students after grade 7. In the high school, our kids typically take a pathway of algebra, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calculus. So there's only 4 years there, but we have students that need to. We're going to be entering math and science fields that need to take calculus. So a couple different ways to approach acceleration. What we've currently done is we've basically compacted grades math 7 and math 8, trying to do that into 1 year. It's impossible. So you have to basically omit some standards. So the Common Core standards, those are learning progressions. very, very important in terms of how those are developed. So what we would like to do is we are going to be creating a pathway for students where we're going to be accelerating after grade 5, entering into grade 6. And so what we're going to be doing is compacting, so creating 2 courses where we're compacting 3 years of the Common Core standards into 2. So doing that, again, allows us to make sure our students have a strong foundation, a deep understanding of those standards. We're not skipping any of the standards. We found, particularly in some of our high school courses, that our students don't have a strong foundation because they haven't been instructed or had the opportunity actually, instructed on those standards. So that's what we're looking to do. That's really, like I said, kind of the program. That is traditionally what most high schools do. That's kind of it's a very normal pathway. So K-5 instruction, and then again, we'll be identifying students to go into that program after grade 5. So I don't know, Mr. Gordon, you want me to take any questions first about that or move on to the next?
Ms. Barbelow is in charge of this meeting, so let's.
Okay, I know we as a board, it was an open meeting of the curriculum committee when we had discussed this back in January. So I'll ask if our board members I know at that time posed questions. I'm not sure if there are any additional questions from the board on mathematics. If not, if there are no additional questions from the board, then I'll open it up to our community. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Ribau?
Yeah, okay. Always.
Yes,
Sorry.
ma'am.
So if we made this shift, will there be other opportunities, say, for a student who, for whatever reason, doesn't qualify or isn't ready in 5th grade, and they go through some period of growth, and by 9th grade they're ready to sort of jump back onto an accelerated pathway? Will there be opportunities for them to make up that ground?
Yes, and so one of the things is that we always want to make sure students are prepared, and so sometimes that may involve summer work. So they're actually getting some instruction on the standards that they missed to be able to do that. Currently, right now, we allow students to take a summer course at a local college or university in pre-calculus, to take calculus in their senior year. We also allow students to go and enroll sometimes in geometry course and an algebra 2 course. Those 2 math courses aren't as connected as other ones, so we allow them to do that as well. Yeah, so that's a concern for ours. Also, in developing the criteria for the program, we want to be as flexible as possible and give students opportunities. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other board questions? Okay, any questions from our community? Mary?
I have a question. I noticed on the slide it talks about for the high school level data science. I know that a lot of universities have in the IT tracks like database and data related college courses. So with this path that you're putting up there, is there a college and a high school accompaniment to it?
There is not. So the new data science course, we actually just developed. There's not currently right now. Actually, I don't know of any local universities that offer actually data science course. This is a new curriculum out of Stanford University in California. But we don't have any necessary local partnerships yet. That's something that potentially could come about. Actually, the data science course as well includes some programming in it. Using the Python programming language. So one of our instructors has actually just recently taken a course on that. But it's brought the question up. So data science, we did, I think, do at the committee meeting, we did a presentation to the committee for the Board of Education on the data science course. We're very excited about it. I think it's going to be, again, a great course for students to give them an alternative pathway for that 3rd math credit. It's a very in-demand career pathway right now. As you know, we collect a lot of data in our world, and it needs to be analyzed. So very, very important career pathway. And also, I think it's also going to be a nice lead way also for our students that are pursuing a statistical field as well, and going into an AP statistics course. So we're excited about it. Currently, right now, I think we have 51 students enrolled for next year, as we're going through our programming, so.
Any other questions for Mr. Burdell? Well, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
So we have Mr. Bogart, our district supervisor of science, who's going to talk about the pilot program, which will have some staffing implications for ninth grade. Bogart, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. Our pilot program in ninth grade is designed to address track. Currently in ninth grade, we have 4 different tracks. They are all biology tracks. 2 of the tracks are what we call stretch tracks. These are stretch programs, which means students take biology over the course of 2 years. And then 2 of the programs are standard timeframes, which means that students take biology over 1 year. When you take a look at what's happening in those tracks, what we actually see are a couple of concerns. First of all, any student that is put into a stretch track is predisposed to not take a second Regents course in science for the rest of their high school career. So looking at the data, we only have about 7% of students that enter stretch programs actually go on to a second Regents course, which is too low. On the other hand, students who go on to a single-year track, Regents or honors, for example, over 90% of those students will move on to a second Regents science. And in fact, a large amount of those will move on to a third Regents science, and so on. In addition to that, we have overrepresentation of marginalized populations in our stretch programs. And a underrepresentation of marginalized students in our one-year programs. And so because of those factors, we're trying to figure out ways that we can have a different program, a different approach to science that will address all of that. So we have created an idea, a model, in which we are going to essentially combine all the students from the different tracks into a single space. And we're trying to capture the best features of each track in that space. And so the goal of the program is essentially to make sure that all students get more. So traditionally, honor students that will find themselves in this pilot program will actually get more than what they would have gotten had they just chosen an honors track. The same with Regents and the same with our stretch tracks as well. All students will get more in this program. So we're really excited about that. It does have staffing implications because we have a lot of work to do to make this actually operational. This program will work under the new standards, so we will actually be out ahead of the implementation of the new science standards for this program in particular. And so we do have pilot units essentially that we're doing at the high school under the new standards, but we do not have a full program yet under the new standards, which is what we plan for this program. In addition, we have to do a lot of work on what the honors program will look like inside of this program. We are still maintaining an honors program. We are losing the honors track, but maintaining an honors program. And so we are working on a variety of materials, which will be research-based, portfolio-based, project-based materials. And if any of the science teachers are watching on the live stream, they will be surprised to know that we've also laid some foundation for articulation with RPI. Actually, there's a possibility that we might be able to get our honors program articulating with the graduate program at RPI, which is pretty cool. Something that our honors program currently does not do. So more forever. I guess I don't know how much detail you're looking at. I don't know if the curriculum committee had met in January about this.
Yes.
So, but I'm happy to answer any questions regarding this.
I think for staffing implications, the term special assignment, so we're going to be using that. So there's a term called TOSA that stands for Teacher on Special Assignment. A teacher on special assignment allows us to be innovative and essentially use federal grant funding, which is scheduled to run out. So special assignment teacher is hired with the clear understanding that it is a year-to-year appointment, and that, at the end of the day, we could continue that appointment. That appointment could actually be hired, because it's a great opportunity for someone to say, hey, I'd love to come to the district and work in the district. I can teach and establish that I am a solid educator and essentially come on and be part of our staff, but it is not a forever commitment, and it's designed so fiscally so that if the fiscal climate changes, and specifically when federal grant funding runs out, okay, it's not that we're going to fall off the cliff. We are prepared to transition rather easily. So I think I just want to take the time here to note special assignment. We're going to be using that term other times throughout this evening as well.
So this board, and we did hear this. Do you have any additional questions?
I'm just going to get clarification on that. So when we talk about staffing implications, any additional teachers hired for this will be on special assignment. They're not going to be
For this particular,
for this proposal. Yes.
No, I don't think so. The current, so for this program, we're actually hiring in-house teachers. The in-house teachers will cover this program. But, so they're the teachers on special assignment.
you're going, but, so the answer to the question is yes. So we're transitioning teachers into this program at point 6. So that creates a need of point 6. So the point 6 person is going to be on special assignment. So you're going to see here, we have instructional coaches, okay? Instructional coaches come into the program. So they're a teacher on special assignment, which means they're doing coaching, okay? But out there, there's a teacher who is hired to fill that person's position, and it's on leave, and it could continue on for a number of years, or it could definitely be to address a specific need after 1 or 2 years. And that's something we design on a year-to-year basis to come forward with changes if need be.
Okay. But the North Colony teacher who transitions over to be on special assignment doesn't lose seniority.
Absolutely not, no. They're still a teacher, they still keep their position, they still keep their seniority area, their tenure area, and all that.
Okay.
Like our stations.
Right.
Yes, that's a good example, absolutely.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the Trinity for Mr. Goldberg?
Thank you.
So I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Valero, and I know I can't give Mr. Valero justice here, but I'll give it a shot. So we are creating a new course here called Civic Engagement and Civic Leadership. And so this new course would also require 0.6 of a teacher on special assignment. So again, similar to the model that Mr. Bogart suggested, Mr. Valero has a teacher, existing staff in mind, who would be teaching this course. The course is going to lead, hopefully, with the application process, and if we get approved, to the State Education Department's Seal of Civic Readiness Initiative and Capstone Civic Experience. So I'm going to talk briefly about the Seal of Civic Readiness Expectations. So to get that specific seal as a designation by the State Ed Department, we have to develop a program that would have some elements in it that would qualify us for that. So the elements would be we would have to, demonstrate fundamental and functional knowledge of government, history, geography, culture, current events, and economics. And this will include current and historic knowledge of inequities within our social government and economic systems. Okay, so there is that knowledge there. In much of our teaching and instruction, this is what is contained when we look at Global History 1. When we look at Global History 2, when we look at United States history and government, and we look at the economics and participation in government courses, along with other electives. It also includes certain specific civic experiences. So the civic experiences would be a civic readiness capstone or civic engagement project. Now, the interesting notion here, we do have engineering capstone projects right now, and these are culminating projects that our senior students do. This would be a culminating senior engagement project. And in that, they would be doing research and advocacy and presentation on a relevant issue, in particular, a social justice issue. They would be engaging in service learning, so they would actually be out in the community. They would be engaging with the community. They would also engage in civil discourse around controversial issues. So I think this is, as we all know, this is an important trait that we need to, or skill, that we need to develop in our students, and it's fundamental to the core of democracy. Okay, so we know, okay, since the Jeffersonian notion of education, that education is fundamental, okay, to the advancement of democracy. The art of discourse around controversial issues is essential to civic readiness. Engaging with news and digital tools, a key component. Digital literacy, understanding news, understanding perspective, understanding bias when it comes to that. These are hardcore social studies issues. Participating in civic-centered activities, for example, right, doing voter registration drives, for example. These would be civic-centered activities. Engaging in public meetings, like, for example, this meeting right here, a school board meeting, engaging in town meetings, engaging with local officials and government institutions, providing public comment to a government agency, or meeting with public and elected officials here. So, in a sense, this is why is it capstone? Okay, because it really represents the apex of working as social studies educators. This is what we want our students to do. This is the goal. So this is the program that has been designed here, as you can see, capacity and conference to solve real-world issues and confront social injustice. Students would choose an issue, they would investigate it, and they would use the capstone framework to do that work. They would work with others, okay, both within school, within the community to collaborate to solve problems. And then they would do a presentation, that would be their capstone project, and it would be how they use a variety of ways to influence public opinion and policy. So this is the proposal here from Mr. Pallero. We are excited about this, and this is what we submitted.
Okay. Board, I know this is part of our, any other questions for Mr.
No, another question, but, I've always been proud of what North Colony teachers do, K through 12, in terms of civic education. And, they do just a wonderful job. And this program is going to be great for our students. And I can see a lot of students having interest in this program. And I can sort of see a capstone civic experience right here with the Board of Education.
Absolutely.
I know, I can see a lot of possibilities, and it's wonderful. So, yeah, we need to do everything we can do to shore up American democracy. And, yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Any questions from our community? Well, thank you, Mr. Cora. Are you carrying on, or it's not carrying on? It's not tonight.
So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mr. Stein here, who will talk about some athletic program enhancement here.
Thank you, Mr. Cora. Thank you for the opportunity to our school board to speak tonight about some of our athletic requests. So I can tell you firsthand that, through many conversations with our partners in the Suburban Council, that we, with probably 2 or 3 other schools in the league, have been the only ones that have experienced a surge in athletic participation this year. About 3/4 of the Suburban Council has experienced at least one team or level that they did not field so far this year because of lack of participation. So, and we've had sort of, for example, right now in our spring season, with our modified track program, that's our 7th and 8th graders, we usually have around 40 boys and 40 girls. We're at 75 of each, 150 middle schoolers running modified track. And that really is just one example of the surge that we've seen. So, we've had many discussions in our athletic department behind some of the reasons of that surge. We really think it comes down to two components. One, this board's support to allow us to do as much as possible within the safety guidelines of COVID last year. It wasn't the normal experience, but there was opportunity still created. So we still engaged our student athletes. And then the second goes back a few years from the support from the board and the community with our facility upgrades and just the interest that has generated. When you put those two things together, I think that's a big part of it. So, we know that extracurriculars, so I don't want to just say athletics. Extracurriculars have had a huge positive impact on our students. We see the students, some of our most struggling students, they tell you, we're coming to school because of art, music, athletics, clubs, and that is not to diminish the academic experience, but coming out of COVID, these are some of the things that our students have told us that it's their reason to be there many days. So it's really, really important. And, when we had our administrative council meeting today, when Renata was speaking to us about, trauma that a lot of our students and adults have experienced, and she moved into her last slide, which had some examples of the way we're dealing with trauma. There was two that really jumped out at me. There was one bubble that was socialization, relationships, mentors. I mean, that is extracurriculars, that is athletics to a T. The socialization, the relationships they build. I think it's important when we use the word relationship as it relates to athletics, because it is not just about the friendship type relationships, but it's the conflict resolution that kids have to deal with. They're competing with other schools, they're competing with each other. These are traits that, got lost in many senses during COVID, where they were found in other areas. Another word that Renata used today was resilience. She said that, a lot of people think that people are just born with resilience, that our students, they're resilient, they're going to bounce back. And she made the comment that, this is something that is taught, something that when a lot of students were home, remote, or were in school in part of the time last year, they didn't get to experience. And resilience in athletics, it's a huge component. Dealing with loss, dealing with disappointment, bouncing back, have to come out in the second half, maybe after a rough first half. These happen all the time. So this is really a big driver as to why we are requesting some significant athletic additions for next year. By significant, I think the second bullet speaks to that. That's that the additions that we're requesting could mean between 180 and 200 new roster spots for our student athletes. And when we go to the next slide, I'm going to give you a quick breakdown a little bit about each sport and its impact, and then obviously some questions that you may have for me at the end. So if I could have the next slide, please. So you see there's a number of new programs. At the top is girls and boys alpine skiing. This is race skiing. So I just want to tell you that this budget was formed in conjunction with speaking to some of our partners in the Suburban Council, getting a sense of how they budget for a boys and girls alpine ski team, what it entails, what types of costs that students incur themselves, and what a typical athletic budget covers with an alpine ski team. So those are reflective of what some of our partners are budgeting for alpine skiing. I will say that that number actually has the potential to go down. I've already been in discussions with Shenandoah, and essentially for their alpine ski team, they go to the mountain twice a week. They use a charter bus. The charter bus stays, and the charter bus becomes the quote-unquote lodge, where they come down, they need to get warm before they go back out, and they have a chaperone on the bus. While we have one coach at the top of the hill and one at the bottom. And that is something that they've already asked if this program is approved, that they would be interested in sharing that cost with us. So that's a big piece of the contractual cost that you see there. So that number could go Girls and boys Nordic skiing, some refer to this as cross-country skiing. This is another unique program that, since probably more so than alpine skiing, is the type of sport where students can be grabbed out of the hallway and say, you can give this a try. Alpine, some experience is going to be required from a safety standpoint. So there's no question about that. But with Nordic, this truly can be a sport where our students can try this for the first time. A big piece of the cost in our supply is going to be roller skis. And that's when there is not snow on the ground, and our student athletes are going to be able to train outside on roller skis. But when it comes to some of their own personal equipment, such as the skis they would use to race, the students would be required to supply that equipment themselves. Moving on to boys modified volleyball, we currently have 2 levels of boys volleyball. We have a varsity and JV. In girls volleyball, we have 3. We have a varsity, a JV, and a modified. So we would like to include for our 7th and 8th grade boys, for them the opportunity to play modified at the middle school level. Girls bowling, currently technically we have a boys bowling team, but it doesn't operate as a co-ed team. Just simply the way that the rules are written, if you are going to have a co-ed team, you do need to list it as a boys team, but we have been carrying as many girls as wanted to try out for as long as I've been here at North Colony. And we see an opportunity to break off and have a girls team. That is another sport where the cost potentially could go down, potentially to half, as South Colony has expressed interest in possibly merging for girls bowling. And for us, that would probably be a good fit as a startup program until we build up our numbers. So that potentially could happen. Girls and boys modified tennis. Again, another opportunity that's here for our middle schoolers. This is a tennis community, all right? When the decision was made to include new tennis courts for the capital project, it was probably one of the best investment that the school could have made as far as, one of the positive recreational impacts on our community. Our tennis courts, when they're not being used by our programs, get used by this community quite a bit. Tennis is big, and for us to offer an opportunity for boys and girls to participate at the middle school level, and that's a sport where we can keep big numbers. We can have 30 boys, 30 girls, maybe even a little bit more. That number might be conservative, so that's a great opportunity for our middle schoolers. Girls wrestling is an emerging sport in New York. We have girls that were on our modified program, our modified boys program, and our JV varsity program. And this year, actually, we had our first ever sectional place finisher. Caitlin Drake, she was our 102-pounder. She qualified for the state qualifiers. It was the first female ever from this district to do so. And we have girls that are interested. Our boys coach, knowing that this is something we're hoping we can have sooner than later, but definitely, if not next year down the road, he's already had some open mats where we have girls coming out that are just getting it a try. The big driver was the idea that there could be a separate girls team. And that was more appealing to them, understandably so for many girls. And then the last request is not a new program opportunity. It's asking for a varsity assistant for our boys and girls volleyball programs. Boys and girls volleyball is our only team sport that has multiple levels, meaning more than 2, 3, some sports have 4 or 5, but have multiple levels that do not have a varsity assistant. And one of the key pieces and key roles of a varsity assistant oftentimes is to be what we sometimes call a program coach, a coach that can get to practices and events at other levels and bring some continuity and build relationships before the kids just come to them as they get older. And that's our only team sport, again, with multiple levels that does not have varsity assistants, and it would be a very good use to those programs. So I wanted to leave room for questions that anyone may have.
Thank you. Paula?
So you said that there's a big jump in the numbers, Is this including the sixth graders? Are they allowed to compete now that we have a middle school, not junior high school?
It's a good question. They are not, and that is by New York State. That's a state ed regulation, so that's not even an athletic regulation. But I am going to tell you that there is discussion at the state level of possibly looking at that. I had heard that as recently as just a couple of weeks ago. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know if it's going to gain steam or what point it's at, but I know it's something that is being discussed.
So they can't even do the SEC?
No, which we now call the APP. Yeah.
My.
It took me a second to remember S&C because it's been APP for a little while now. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this goes back a long.
Yeah, but can I say to your point about the advanced placement process, I'll call it, that this really has these requests have a huge impact on the middle school, not just because we're asking for modified boys volleyball and modified tennis, but being that alpine and Nordic skiing and girls wrestling and girls bowling are just a varsity level sport, we are more apt to look at 7th and 8th graders who can pass our athletic placement process and be involved in these programs so they can take on a 7-12 feel, so to speak, because there isn't a lower level. It just doesn't even exist. There wouldn't be anybody to compete against, So there's a lot of room in here to give opportunities for our middle schoolers, and we're bursting here. The kids want the opportunities. They are showing up in force.
And then how many are on an alpine skiing team?
There isn't a number to that, but I'm going to tell you that the established programs that have been around can be as many as between 15 and 20 per gender. Yeah. I know that Alpine has been something that my first 3 years before COVID hit, I had a parent or two a year that would reach out and ask about it, if there ever the possibility. I know we have kids in our school that do currently compete and race on the club side, that it's a high school sport where if you compete in club, you can do both, and actually the kids get to do both. They just talk about what a great experience it is to do something that competing in a sport or already competing in, but getting to represent their school. There's like a really great marriage between kids who privately race and kids who have a school team to be on, which is encouraging because not all sports are like that nowadays.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we anticipate a way for students who want to participate in Nordic skiing but can't afford their own equipment to raise those funds?
Yeah, I think so, and I can tell you that, I think we have a few avenues, and I think first and foremost, we have the Shaker All Sports Booster Club, and they're not there to just service any one particular sport, but they're there to advance the athletic program wherever it, sometimes can't at the moment from a budgetary standpoint. So I know I would be comfortable if we needed to help out particular students that, maybe they couldn't and we need to find a way. Absolutely. Mr. Corey mentioned to me before too, do we start looking at, see if there's any grant programs out there? I say absolutely. So there's ways. In my time here, I've never seen a student athlete not have an opportunity to try something because, they didn't have the means to get the equipment. We would definitely make that happen.
So that's an excellent question. So I know US Ski and Snowboard is acutely aware of, with Alpine and with Nordic variations, of course. I think this is an issue near and dear to me too, because, I love water sports. Always love water sports, still continue to love water sports. And I think that it's important for kids to have that experience and like. So I know that there is general recognition here that especially Alpine is expensive with equipment and the like. So I think I would also make a personal commitment here, perhaps we can wait for grants from USD and Snowboard, but certainly also look with organizations. There is a big turnover in race equipment, especially with kids, because kids grow. All right, so there is a major market for used equipment, and in terms of doing that sport. I think it is a great opportunity for kids. I think Newark is a great opportunity for kids because Newark is also, it is a competitive race sport. Again, you're looking at two styles. You're looking at classic style. You're looking at skate style with the kids. I think they compete in both areas as well. But the key point is that I think that would be part of what we would want to do. We would want to look at, if we want to look at making winter sports and competitive winter sports accessible to as many kids that we have. So, although the cost for us to foot the bill would be prohibitive, there's no reason why we couldn't explore means, including grants from national organizations to support this sport. So, what we're thinking.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, you know, when it comes to Alpine, if there is a student who has never skied downhill, right, we're looking to break them in, not through being on the Alpine ski team, but other means that can compress the ski club. You know, there are things that we can support them. So there's steps before they would try out for an Alpine team, but Nordic, as I mentioned before, could be something they can not only jump right into, but that is also something that, from an equipment standpoint, over time, we may be able to build it from a phys ed standpoint, because if the interest is there, that can be a phys ed activity, you know, so, okay, you can use the phys ed equipment, if it's a kid who really enjoys it, it's time to get them a better set. We know they've invested, and we're gonna invest in that.
And just one more thing about Nordic. Nordic is a great option for kids. You know, some schools, they're track and field kids, they're distance kids, so they do cross country, they do indoor, they do outdoor. Nordic is a good break, which is a needed break from doing the same repetitive motion, which causes injury and the like. So, you know, I think it's a great winter option for some of our kids. We would be joining a pretty healthy group of schools who already compete in those areas. And particularly North Country schools like John First, North Creek, and some of those schools that be part of that. So.
I would assume that like cross country and track, there's no practical limit on the number of students who can be involved.
There is not. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. You know, I just want to applaud what's presented here from, you know, when I look at this, it's a lot of lifetime sports, which I know is, you know, a lot of the mission that you drive, Matt, you know, from both our athletic and our phys ed departments. You know, we talk about civics and setting up our students for life. You know, this is an introduction to some lifetime sports. So I think it's a great selection of sports to add depth to the current athletic program.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Well, I was just thinking about the fact that it would be nice to give students at the elementary level some kind of opportunity to get to know skiing, because skiing is, as we all know, a pricey, recreational sport. And so I was just thinking it would be great. We don't have ski opportunities for little kids, right, in our district. Do we?
Yeah.
So, because it's, what, not,
I know
we should have it at every school.
I know the world's different now, but in the 90s, we used to ski in the woods at Southgate as part of PE class.
The world is different.
The world is different. The world's very different, but it has become.
Okay. Any questions from our community members?
I just wanted to mention that, thanks for this. I don't know if you talked about the intramural program. I was oversubscribed. Kids are often falling out the doors. So I think this. Exactly. There's tons of interest, but I think this speaks to responding to that interest for those 7th and 8th graders. It doesn't get by the 6th graders that opportunity, but that would sort of alleviate that and allow more space for 6th graders to not be locked out of intramurals because of the distance.
Some of our intramural offerings could be beefed up a little more specific to the sixth grader with some of these added seventh and eighth grade opportunities. Yeah, yes.
I just want to comment on, as a sixth grade parent, my son has asked me, all school year, why can't he play sports? And so if the state would love input from students that are in middle school now, you know, I'm sure that there's a chance vouch that they would love to be able to participate, but can't because of that. So, yeah, I just want to comment on that. Thank you for the programs you do.
Thank you.
So I am a two-sport athlete. Looking at this right now, I'm mostly going to become a three-sport athlete. So I appreciate everything that all you guys have done with the budgets that you guys have made, and especially last year, because coming to school during COVID, wearing your jersey, and everyone being like, oh my gosh, it's game day. We're all so excited to be there. And the fact that athletics have made such a huge impact on every single student. And I know a bunch of my friends who noticed that they were on track team and they just became track team because those people become your friends and your family. I have been playing with some of these girls since the seventh grade and I can't imagine their life without them right now. So I really appreciate everything you just have done, the athletics department and the budget committee to make this school's athletic department above and beyond basically. Because it's crazy how much of an impact that work you guys have done to all the students. So thank you for that.
That is a very high compliment. Thank you for that. And so with it, here, things like you just stated,
We always want to do as much as we can for, you know, all our students.
thank you, Carrie, thank you, Davis.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to second that elementary school ski club.
I didn't think that was
very. It's a fourth grade ski club. I think there's definitely demand for it. My kids started during the pandemic as well. Took ski lessons at Boston all day. Everybody are looking forward to it. I think they have enough friends that would like to get into it. It's definitely a big great thing.
Excellent, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so as we transition away from new program requests, we're going to transition into federal grant funding, which Mr. Gordon set up earlier. But I hope you heard as we went through the new program requests how thoughtfully they are aligned to the district's mission and to the pillars and the shifts that we were trying to do to come back stronger. So you certainly heard a student say better than I how, you know, so much of what Matt's proposing in athletics really speaks to social and emotional. It speaks to equity. You heard in the math and the science presentations and social studies how we're trying to get into deeper and more authentic projects for students that have student choice and voice and agency. So all of those pieces coming together to help us kind of form this budget moving forward. So we move forward, now we're going to take a step back and talk a little bit about federal grant funding. So you can read the slide, but we all know that as part of the federal relief packages that came out around the coronavirus, that schools, North Colony being one of them, got money in order to help us return from the pandemic. And we really had a lot of flexibility with these grants. A lot of paperwork, but a lot of flexibility in that we really had to hit anything that could help kids gain academically, anything that they might have missed along the way with the pandemic, as well as social, emotional, and mental health and well-being. So anything from accelerated learning to catch students up to more rigorous curriculum to funding additional personnel, counselors, school nurses, school psychologists, and then down to the very basics of how we keep each other safe with better ventilation, better health and safety measures, better cleaning and sanitizing procedures. So all of that was allowable under these federal grants. Next slide, please. So there were 3 different funding sources, and the slide is numbered, so I'm going to anything with numbers,
Thank you. So
The federal government provided funding to school districts through various authorizations. And there are 3 different authorizations. You can see them on the slide. The funding periods all started at the same time, March of 20. The top 2 go through September of 23 and the last through September of 24. And there's flexibility, as Ms. Field mentioned, and a lot of flexibility in the use and flexibility with pretty extended periods of time to use the funds. So here's a summary, a snapshot of what our applications look like for each of those 3 funding sources. The lion's share of the funding is being scheduled to use for professional salaries over those periods of time. Also some support salaries, significant materials and supplies, whether it be MERV 13 filters or equipment for various programs or HVAC rooftop units to help with our ventilation. Employee benefits, they're associated with salaries, of course. A little bit of purchase services for things like COVID attestation during the onset and keeping everyone safe to build. Any questions on that?
Yes. I was thinking with the MERV 13 filters, I would assume that's something that we have to repurchase frequently.
We have, correct.
Are they significantly more expensive than what we were using 3 years ago? That it makes a difference, or is the money's not going to be there perpetually?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
They were extraordinarily more expensive than the historic filters that were being used, in part because they just are more expensive, in part because it was the pandemic and cost everything shot up.
So at some point in the maintenance budget, we're going to have to find money to keep that going.
Over the course of the last couple of years, Mr. Kraft and Facilities Department has established a program in which they're swapped out on a periodic basis and is part of the ongoing.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Do we have any questions from the community? Thank you, Scott.
Scott gave you the 10,000 foot view, so when we obviously were given these funds, we had to think about how we wanted to expend the funds, given where we were coming back from the pandemic. And as we always do, we thought about it in terms of the 3 pillars. So thinking about academic excellence, so Scott showed you that some of this went to salary. So we added to our team of academic intervention specialists in both ELA and mathematics, thinking students could benefit from more additional support. We provided professional development and literacy, particularly at the K2 level where foundational skills are taught. We know that, our students who missed kindergarten and first grade, so really making sure as they were coming in as second graders that we were doing the best we could. So we've spent a lot of time, and the board has heard about our new K-2 literacy program. We added additional literacy materials to each K-5 classroom library. We added an additional media specialist to the middle school now that it was 3 grades deep, and understanding how our media specialists just help our students in their engagement with all their subject areas. We added teacher force teachers. These are newly certified teachers to each of our buildings to support and supplement instruction so that we could give additional small group support. We also use them as substitutes so that on days when we had many adults in the building who were out sick, or they were out quarantined, or their families were out quarantined, we never had to close school because of a shortage of staffing, because we had really recruited heavily, knowing that all of the schools in the region use the Capital Region BOCE subservice. We knew we wouldn't be able to rely on that and stay open. And so our teacher force teachers have been instrumental in our staying open. And we redesigned and we reimagined our summer learning program. We moved away from the traditional summer school model. We offered engagement camps last summer to get kids back onto campus. We offered credit recovery models, and we changed all our models to try to meet the needs of students last summer, and we will do that again this summer. In terms of equity, if we think about equity as innovating to promote excellence and avoiding opportunity gaps, right? We hear sometimes about results and that there is a gap in achievement, but we're thinking about where are the gaps in opportunities, because some students have access to things outside of school that others don't. So we were able to add 6 innovation teachers for the middle school for a term of 2 years to design enrichment curriculum for all of our students. Now, this is an interesting thing about these federal grants. We've always had federal grants before, but they're annual grants. But what you saw on Scott's slide is these carried over multiple terms. So certain things went in there for just the first year. Certain things went in there for a 2-year term because we could do that, and that was approved. So we have 6 innovation teachers. So we have these beautiful labs. We had an infusion of money which allowed us to buy the supplies and the equipment for these labs and also to staff them. We added an elementary lead innovation teacher to design and support elementary innovation scope and sequence. We have 1 innovation space in each of our elementary buildings. We were able to put a teacher on special assignment so that she could be in charge of, with a team, developing a scope and sequence. So no matter what elementary school you go to, you get the same access to an innovation program, which we're really proud of. We're doing ongoing professional development for innovation teachers, including some K-2 leads, art teachers, media specialists. We're supporting our 4th and 5th grade centers and also the middle school innovation teachers. We have purchased supplies and equipment for all 12 innovation labs. So that's 6 elementary, 6 in the middle school. So the timing of the federal grant money for us to be able to buy some of these supplies and buy some of this equipment so that we could really build the best program. It's exciting. We are very proud of the work there, and we are very proud of the opportunities students have in those spaces. We also added a 2nd district-wide instructional technology teacher specialist to support the ongoing work with digital platforms. Gary Cimarelli has been our instructional technology teacher specialist for years. We added a 2nd person who we put in this grant. As we're all coming back, and we're trying to get back to in-person learning, but also take advantage of the technology tools that we found during the pandemic, we were able to add a 2nd teacher there to make sure that all students had access. And social emotional learning, which is obviously student, staff, safety, and well-being. We added additional counselors to the middle school to transition to secondary school and design a 6th grade support program. So we have 2 6th grade counselors who are helping our students. It's always hard enough to come to middle school. We're coming to middle school after a pandemic. So we have 2 new counselors. We added an additional social worker to help families connect with resources that they need. So we have 3 social workers who serve our elementary population. We have a social worker at the middle school, and with a student assistance counselor, and we have 2 student assistance counselors at the high school. We added more hall monitors, and you might think, well, how does that fit in? But remember, when we first came back from the pandemic, there were very strict regulations about 6 feet away and getting onto buses and all those things. So all those extra monitors, both at the elementary, where we've never had them before, and adding them to this very big now middle school to help us with that student supervision and support in maintaining all the safety protocols with COVID. We were able to hire teachers and tutors for quarantine students. We felt very strongly this year that as students were getting quarantined in big numbers, particularly in the fall, we don't have distance learning. We don't have distance learning. We have Zoom and we have remote learning, but we don't have 360-degree cameras in every classroom. We don't have 360-degree microphones. And one thing we could have done is say, okay, kids, when you're quarantined, we'll have one of your peers open up a Chromebook and try to listen in if you can. I hope you can hear the teacher who's teaching the 26 kids in front of her. We know that that's what some districts did. We did not want to do that. So what we did was we used this money, we affectionately called it Quarantine Academy. We had elementary teachers we hired specifically for this, so that when students were quarantined, they logged on with a teacher who was specifically instructing them in what they were missing. At the secondary level, obviously, you don't have one teacher if you're a secondary kid, you have 7 or 8. So we started a plan where we had our own teachers and we hired them to be tutors so that they could then meet with students and go over the classroom. Kids were very used to, from the pandemic, going on Google Classroom, finding their assignments. That's not the same as having your teacher present. So we really made a commitment to give our students access to teachers who were there for them. And we were able to do that because of the grant, because it can be very isolating if you are quarantined, and sometimes kids were quarantined for themselves and then quarantined again for a sibling and then somebody else, and they could be out for a long amount of time. And trying to just zoom into a class when a teacher is teaching 30 others, we really made a commitment and we're proud of that. And we're grateful that we have the grant money to do that. You know that we started our own North Colony testing clinic back in the fall. People were able to come to central office and get PCR tests. We did that through a partnership with Sienna. We hired their student nurses and were able to pay them and staff that clinic that was available to families and to staff members. We created a supervisor of nursing position. That person had to take on the responsibilities of being the district COVID coordinator. You know, as somebody said it earlier today, we all thought this year might be a little bit easier than last year, and this year was very hard. And there were incredible contact tracing rules at the beginning of the year, and incredible amounts of work being done by all of our principals to look at who sat next to who was on the bus together, and somebody to organize all of that. So we were able to create that position, which included contract tracing, state reporting, clinic management, test kit distribution, as well as the daily supervision of our school nurses. So all of these things were done through the COVID relief programs from the federal government. Additionally, thinking about health and safety measures, we were able to be reimbursed as a district from anything we did from March 13th, 2020. So we were able to go back and say some of those MERV 13 filters, the PPE that we bought, the masks that we bought, the gloves that we bought, the cleaning supplies, the filtration supplies, all of those things, we were able to go back. Mr. Hoot was able to look at our budget, and we were able to apply and as a district get reimbursed for all of that funding. So we also did that. This is not a little go to enrollment, but we can stop with questions on that portion if you would like.
Do we have any questions? Okay, any questions from our community? Yeah, will you be doing enrollment?
I am indeed doing enrollment. We're even so this is our current enrollment as of April 1st, and so you can see a couple of things just that I want to point out. You have the buildings from the top, the grade levels going up and down. And one of the things that you can see is over the years we have been talking about, we are building Battle Hills up to a 4 deep elementary school, meaning they're going to have 4 sections at every grade level. As of right now, they have 4 sections in K through 4, and next year they will go to their 4th section in K through 5, and that will complete the 4D. One of the things you see is, with the exception of the 4D Battle Hills and the 2D Louderville, the other buildings have come very close in size. They're actually within, 10 of each other. So 444, 454, 462, 443. So our other elementary buildings are evening out in those mid-400 range. Battle Hills will obviously get a little bit bigger with one more section, and Louderville is up in the high 2s, which is about where it will stay. The middle school is currently at 1,423 students, projected to go to 1,450 students for next year. The high school is at 1,965. That's actually projected to make a little bit of a jump to 2018 students for next year. And so maybe go to the next slide. A little bit of a space issue in our elementary school. So elementary enrollment continues to grow. So these are the projections for next year. These are based on the number of current students in front of us as well as our demographers report. So we figured in our current students, rolled them over, and then added the increase as forecasted by our demographer, who is remarkably accurate in his projections. So we feel good faith in that. So across the top, you have the grade levels, K to 5. Underneath those are the board class size guidelines. And what you can see, for example, is Blue Creek is projected to have 69 kindergartners with 3 sections. That would be 23 kids per section. So that is right on the nose. That's why I have it in red. That doesn't mean it's going to end up there, because obviously new families are moving into the district, and so we might swing them to Latham Ridge, or we might swing them to Ports Ferry. So that's part of the work that Denise does, so that we balance across. So the way it reads is the first number, 69, is the amount projected at the grade level. The next number, 3, is the number of sections, and then that is the average class size of 23. So we follow Blue Creek across. Blue Creek has a bubble going through. It's going to hit 5th grade next year, where they're only 2 deep. So they are really on the nose. So what that means is if new 5th graders move into the district and they are close to the Blue Creek zone, we're going to have to look for an alternate placement, which is what we have been doing all along, and that's how we got to the balance, as we saw on the previous screen, across the elementary schools. Ballot Hills, you can see, is running 4 deep, and the star in 5th grade is because next year they will go 4 deep. So that will be a new teacher we're adding to the budget. So we've done that each year for Ballot Hills, and they will complete their 4 deep progression. Ports Ferry is over. They are projected to have 74 students in kindergarten, 3 sections. That would be approximately 25 per section. We will not allow that to happen, but that's to show you how tight kindergarten is. More to come in kindergarten in a moment. You can see Latham Ridge is also tight in kindergarten with 66, so they're right on the brink of 22. Loudon Hill's at 21, and Ballot Hills is at 21, so it's not like they're tiny by any stretch of the imagination. And you have Southgate also right on the nose with 73 sections at 23. Very tight numbers there. We'll talk about that in a second. After that, you can see the numbers are pretty comparable to what we've had in previous years, and we do have space in other grades. Kindergarten, next slide please. Kindergarten is very interesting. So what we can tell you right now is we are adding a 1.0 teacher to Ballot Hills for grade 5. That completes the 4D that we've been doing over the last several years. We're going to do this year what we did last year. We're going to add a 1.0 kindergarten teacher to the budget in reserve, because these are projections. Right now, as of March 1st, which is the last time we could pull the data, we only had 203 students registered for all of kindergarten. That is far below the projection of 403. So the question is, are there 200 more out there who are actually going to register? Something that's interesting, if you don't have a student coming into kindergarten, is a few years ago we went to online registration. You used to get a letter in the mail that said, this is your week, come into the registrar, register your child. This is your week. Now, you could just go online and do the registration. So busy parents, busy families, like, I gotta go online and do registration. We still sent out the letter, we still said, do it this week, do it that week. That's how we got the first 203 in. But here's what we learned from last year. So last year at this time, we had 184. So we got a few more right now at 203. McGibbon, that's our demographer, he predicted that we would have 406 students in kindergarten this year. In fact, we have 383. His projection was over by 23. So if you're quick, you realize that's the equivalent of 1 section. He was over by 23 students, which is our class size. So when we looked at that, as the kindergarten enrollment was coming in, we recognized last year we didn't need that extra section. And so we held in 18 sections of kindergarten, and they've averaged about 21, and we've had space. So now we're trying to use that information and kind of forecast into the future for this year. So it's 203. You can see that last year from 184 to where we ended up at 383, the difference is 199 students. So for easy math, let's just call it 200 kids. 200 kids up. Interestingly enough, we have 203 he's projecting 403, that's 200 kids up. If those 200 kids all show up, then we would have an average class size of 18 sections at 22.38. And we can't make 0.38 of a child, and we can't distribute that across. So we are monitoring this closely. We're going to be calling all the families that we know, trying to find out, like, are you enrolling them in a private school? Is it something else? To get these numbers in. But what we will do, as we did last year, was by July 1, see, do we need to add that section? So when Mr. Ford does a summary at the end, you'll see a 1.0 in reserve. We have to watch kindergarten numbers. We just don't have the data like we have on all the other grades. Special education staffing, which is also due to an enrollment increase, and we're going to have Casey Barton come talk about that.
All right, good evening, everyone. And, you know, Mr. Stein mentioned earlier the word surge, and that's exactly what we are seeing here in special education. And I'm going to start with the elementary level here tonight, and just talk a little bit about what we have seen in the last year and a half. Really, it hasn't. I wrote down here since 2020, but it's really been the last year and a half. We've seen a surge in enrollment for special education students, and it's increased to about 64 students district-wide. And more specifically, at our elementary level, we've seen 45 new students come in, and that significantly impacts our ratios, impacts our student need. And another interesting anecdote here is that, you know, we're seeing that folks are coming in to really get access to our specialized special education programs, our self-contained programs at the elementary level and beyond. So just to give you a little bit of some numbers here, again, related to those special programs, we've had 15 students come in out of that 45 that really need those highly specific programs related to medically fragile, our autism classrooms, our communication classrooms, and to some extent our behavior classrooms. So, you know, that significantly impacts our buildings. Additionally, we've had students that are coming in from other districts that have already been placed in outside place programs. So, for example, two students that in another school district, those students were placed at Wildwood, the Wildwood program, and when they enrolled in our district, we are able to support them in district. So those are two students that in other districts would have otherwise been placed outside of the district. Additionally, we had one other student come in that was placed in a day treatment program, and again, we were able to service that specific student in-house. So we are seeing that that expansion, that need in our programs. We're proud of that, and you know it continues to go along with that idea that we've been seeing for quite some time. Is, you know, North Colony continues to be the White House district for folks seeking those specialized programs at our elementary level and throughout our middle school and our high school level programming. The other thing that we're really trying to look at is, as you all know, we've historically had some of our specialized self-contained programs housed in Southgate, and we've started to expand those programs because we have so many of them. And really, we're looking years down the road, and I will credit two of my colleagues that are here this evening, Amber Banky and Heather Quinn, really mapping that out over the next several years. And we see that expansion continuing. But the good news is we're going to be able to create programs in other elementary buildings throughout the district, which means that we won't have to necessarily have a family that comes into our district and they are in the Forts Ferry, say, zone, but then they have to go to Southgate for programming. So that will happen in every scenario, but we're looking forward to that expansion of programs across the district. So that is something to look forward to. Another just piece here that I think is important for everyone to know. You know, we're really a school. You know, we have a school within a school. You know, for example, the Wildwood program at the elementary level, K through 5, they have 5 specialized self-contained programs. We have 9, K through 5. 13, K through 12, they have 20, so they have more there. But again, you know, we really have a school within a school, so it continues to expand. So what we have is really a need for 2 programs. Like we have 913, and that program is really looking at students that are self-contained primarily, but we're looking for opportunities to push them out both in the mainstream setting and for some of our mainstream classes and so on. So that's one class that we will try to develop. Another class is more focused on our self-contained students with autism communication challenges, and that will be primarily a self-contained program, 612 program. So that really captures our elementary increase in that regard. And then middle and high school, what I'd like to do is combine that need, because really what that does is it kind of speaks and dovetails nicely into what Keith was speaking to earlier, which is access, and access for our students that are trapped in a sense. So we right now are looking to expand our continuum of programming. So we have 15-1 special classes at the elementary level, meaning they are specially designed classes in ELA, in math, in science, in social studies. We have those in the elementary programs. We're looking to expand those all the way through middle school and high school. Again, they are specific, specially designed classrooms with special education teachers to teach that content area, which is credit bearing. So it would allow students to really have access to the general ed curriculum, and then we would look to get access to other programming moving forward throughout the continuum of programming in every single subject area, every single content area. So that's really both in middle and high. What we're looking to do is to expand our continuum of services so that we can really program for both our lower functioning cognitive students and also our behavioral students that really need that smaller specialized class to ultimately allow for access to other levels, other science classes in the future, other math classes, using science as a potential. He spoke to that tonight. So that's really what we're looking to do, and why we see this need both at the middle and the high school level. And I can move on. I just move mental health services, and then we'll stop. Sure, that sounds good. So moving on, we've talked a lot about mental health services and the need for social emotional support this evening, as you've heard, and it is a pillar. And we've seen so much need at all levels, but specifically at the high school and middle school level, related to student behaviors. Some of these students are identified students, but we're also seeing an increase of need for non-identified students. The idea here is that we would support with 2 school psychologists, 1 school psychologist at the high school level, 1 school psychologist at the middle school level. And the primary function would really be to look at those higher level tier 3 behavioral needs for students. Could be students who are identified, could be students who are not identified, but really what we're looking at is that high level of need and high level of service. And what we're looking for from this person is to really lead the way in helping to make recommendations and create plans for students that will be successful, that are monitored, that are communicated to all of the stakeholders, all of the team members on that team, from the general ed staff to other folks that are involved. It could be a social worker or what have you. But the idea there is that they would lead the way in helping us to create these plans and then monitor those plans to make sure that we're following through with fidelity. And we have seen success with this. The challenge right now with so many significant needs is the follow through with the plans, is making sure that for this specific kid, that everybody on the team understands exactly the nuances in how we speak with the student, the nuances in how we address the student, the conditions that we need to set up in the classroom to make sure that it's most successful for the specific student that we're creating a plan for. All of that will be kind of led by this person. And the important piece is, like I said, the follow through. So also with this is we would set up time frames. So for students, we would decide at that moment, what is the time frame that we're going to see this plan out? Is it going to be 10 weeks? We really want to come back in 6. And then what is the data telling us? What's the feedback from the teachers? Do we have to keep the plan the same? Is it working? That's good news. If it's not, we can make adjustments along the way. The follow through is key. The clarity is key. And what I failed to mention here is that it's also a coaching position. So it also allows the school psychologist to go in the classroom, provide feedback to the teacher in some of these areas that where the teacher may not have the skill set yet, or the understanding of what the student needs yet. That can be an opportunity for that person to go in and help the rest of the team with that work. I think also from an observation standpoint too, just observing the class, looking at those conditions and making recommendations to the team as to what they think would be the best level of support for each and every student. And now we see a consistent need in both the middle and the high school.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? From our community, any questions? Mary?
I just have a question. I know that in the area of special education, particularly over COVID, in some way there was when you have a child in special education, there is also the wraparound where it takes a village, right? So most special education students go to outside services. So, children would go to either, therapy outside of school, catering services outside of school, which is a wonderful contributor in that village part of the school system, where then the school system benefits from the services that are in the community, and that helps things at the school level. Over COVID, there was almost like a service crisis where therapies in the community at large were cut. They were discontinued over COVID, where children with autism, children with disabilities did not receive their community services, which normally attribute to what happens at school. So I noticed on the prior slide, there was a meets compliance section. And I know that this district strives above and beyond to help our students. So my question is, in your presentation with meeting compliance, do you think that your budget has enough, given the strain that I feel that the school community special education would be suffering because of the COVID crisis?
So let me clarify first the compliance piece. The compliance piece is really what I'm speaking about there, is really staying in our ratio. So for example, a 15:1 classroom that we're not at 60, or a 5:1 ratio in resource room, we're not over ratio. So that's just to clarify that piece. But as far as as far as resources, Heather, actually, it looks like you want to speak to that, so that's fine.
Yeah, you're right, those outside services were, cut from many of our students. I will say the good news is, in my opinion, is that even last year, when we had really low capacity in our county, I think almost all of our self-contained students, at least the elementary level, C2, except for 3, came to school every day. They came to program, they got all their related services, they came every day. There were minimal quarantine that to do, and I think that was a huge shine light to families. They commented on that, and they are all here this year too. We didn't have anyone that opted or needed BOE's ELA, and so I think that's just such a great thing for our students. So I do believe, certainly I don't think they were paid out. A lot of them did switch to virtual therapy with the first year out of them, and then now that they're rolling back for many of our students that are back in a lot of therapy. But I think that really the great piece was having what they do school last year. Again, I'm speaking to them.
I'll add one more thing to that, Mary. I think the answer is no, but I think, to go back to kind of what Ms. Steele was mentioning earlier, is I think the emphasis should be on the expansion of capacity. So we have many resources. I think it's really the expansion of understanding how we can connect to the outside and what are we seeing specific to the student need, and then how can we pair with outside supports and resources and continue to grow those partnerships. We have to continue to grow those.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Sure.
Just see me walk up there, and I talked about skiing before. Can you believe that? Hard to believe. I understand. Okay, so we're going to go through high school staffing additions here. So we have a 1.0 increase in science. A lot of these encompass the new programs that we already talked about. So we have, I have some of my program manager colleagues with me, and they can certainly add to it. But the 1.0 in science is to meet the 0.6 need for the new program pilot, but also to meet programming and enrollment needs at the high school. So that is the 1.0 science. In social studies, we did talk about the 0.6, and that's to meet the new Civic program pilot needs. Do you have any questions, board, about the high school needs? I don't know where you are.
Did you go to Reactive and?
Next slide?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I jumped forward when you started to talk about this one.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. So career and tech ed. So we have Mr. Phillips here, but this will be a total actually, so 0.5 at the high school, 0.5 at the middle school, and essentially to meet enrollment needs, program needs. There is a huge demand for our CTE courses in business and technology, and it's just to provide programming for our students. So 0.5 at the high school, 0.5 at the middle school. We'll get to the middle school piece. Art, 0.6, again, the programs students are subscribing to, so we're adding a 0.6 art at the high school to meet program requirements.
Any questions?
For the middle school, again, for enrollment and program needs, we would add 2/10 of a teacher. That's basically one section. I mentioned for CPE, the other half of an additional 1.0 is 0.5 at career and technical education. By the way, also, you may have noted the slide, when we put salary down, we put salary and benefits. So that includes, that's all inclusive, that includes salary and benefits. That's just for information here. For music, we are, Skills with us this evening, but we have very, very high demands and orchestra. We have our teachers teaching beyond. Okay, they're compensated for teaching beyond their class load, but we need to meet the enrollment needs and the demand in orchestra. So that is the reason for that increase as well. Those are noticeable increases. We have talked about the elementary already, but what we do, we would keep 1.0 kindergarten in reserve, to enrollment mandated, and to complete the going to 4D at Trout Hills, there is an addition of 1.0 at grade 5. We have 2.0 innovation teachers for Blue Creek and South Cape. These would be teachers on special assignments, so the teachers would fulfill their classroom responsibilities, would be an annual position. We have a 1.0 math coach. This individual would be also a teacher on special assignment. That person would provide curriculum and instruction support to math at the elementary level. Let's implement the math curriculum. Janine here tonight, if you want to add anything to coaching.
Mr. Park, can I just add, I want to be clear because it looks like only Blue Creek and Southgate are getting the innovation teachers. We have 3 teachers, so we already have one at Latham Ridge who was the lead. We have 2 teachers who have been serving in that role who are our LEP teachers who have been doing LEP and innovation across buildings. So we would put them in 2 buildings, so that would cover 3 of our buildings. So that would leave out Blue Creek and Southgate. That would get us to our 5. And then we have a separate level of programming because of the smaller number of sections in Loudonville, so they get traveling staff there. But so those 2 would add to the 3 we already have. So all the bigger buildings would have their own staff.
They're also, so they're all teachers on special assignment in these 2 positions that we're advocating here. Essentially, we are adding an English as a language teacher. This is really by enrollment and program needs. We're in here tonight, but it's a simple need that we're anticipating. And I think we also knew from our technology presentation previously, we have a request for 1.0 cybersecurity officer and instructional support. Increasingly big organizations like schools have to be very, very wary of various cyber attacks, and our use has increased phenomenally, particularly since March of 2020. In addition to that, the jobs that we have now assigned to technology, including our phone system, is just more and more and more. So that's the rationale behind that request as well. So those would be, that in essence includes the staffing requests that we would have across the levels and across the district. So when we look at staffing summary, total staffing costs would be $1,850,549. It is the most that I've requested, I think. So I just want to make that point. It's 19.40 new staff. Of that 19.40, 5.2 would be designated as teachers on special assignment. And as I said, they could be continued, they could be returned to the classroom depending upon need and or budget. And they're not permanent, they're subject to annual review. We have in addition to that probably maybe 10 to 12, maybe 15, but it's at least 10 to 12 additional teachers on special assignment currently covering the positions because it's dedicated teachers to do other work in the district. So when we look at our budget snapshot, this is a preview. I think it's important to note that our Board of Education, the process of budget review really begins, it's continuous. So our Board of Education reviews each of the programs. So they have presentations for transportation, presentations for maintenance. These occur throughout the year. Presentations on science, presentations on mathematics, presentations on reading, literacy. So this is not new information to our Board of Education. It's part of the regular work that they do on behalf of the school district. And, you know, we have been, have had many meetings as part of this budget season since March. Each of the nights have been very, I hope, informative and meaningful. So when we take a look at our budget, okay, our budget in 21-22 was $124,977,067. Okay, we're increasing that to $134,775,237. The dollar increase is $9,798,170. That is a spending increase of 7.84%. And we realize too that we're dealing with an inflationary environment, okay, that is running 5+%. That does account for a good chunk of the increase. Mr. Hu can explain this if you need, but our debt service does account for $2.3 million or 1.85% of the overall budget increase. So absent the debt service there, then you take a look at that and our budget increase is spending in that area is around 5%. So what we're looking at here right now, we're looking at projected tax levy increase of 1.5%. Our cap was 3.59%. And we look with assessment growth in terms of what individuals would actually pay. It would be an increase of 0.5% or 0.5%. So, you know, we know that, you know, we did receive federal funding, which is also temporary funding. It's scheduled to run out. We know we did get an increase in foundation aid. What I think the increase in foundation aid really represents is that North County is getting the foundation aid from the state that it was due for years and years and years. And actually this year we're not at full foundation aid, we're at 80%. Okay, so we're still lagging 20%. We are relying on the promise made by the governor and the legislature that the remaining 20% will be delivered next year. That is a promise, it's not a reality. Right? So we have to consider that as we move forward here. So we hope it is a reality because this is not just a doling it out to North County. Foundation aid is based upon a legal action in the state of New York that calls for every student to get a constitutional right to free public education. So therefore, we hope that we just basically get 20% of what we are due as a school district in the following year. We've been promised that, but we need to have that delivered. So when we look at it, the actual tax impact is 0.5%. So when we look at our budget for this year, I think, you know, yes, we did get a substantial increase in foundation aid, which was due to us, and by the way, which we are still not fully funded. Inflation increased at 5%. Okay, so we looked into all of this. We looked at how do we maintain sustainability? How do we keep a budget that is affordable to all our taxpayers and is modest and is moderate? Realizes that people have been paying more for basic services such as food and fuel, housing, and the like. And so therefore, it is a modest impact when you factor in the growth of 0.5% and overall rate increase of 1.5%. So where do we go from here? Okay, where we go from here, we don't have to, you can see the thing, you can see the slide. So April 11th is the night when the board adopts the budget. So when we roll it out, we roll out the budget in, we review the budget. We update the tax cap. We look at the property tax cap report card. We approve different schedules. So, you know, we've had different nights. We've had different nights on equipment. We had nights on maintenance. Today we had new programs and staffing. So we're gonna break out those programs individually. The board approves the budget. They vote on each of those schedules that we call them, and that is part of their formal adoption process. Formally adopt the process on April 11th. On May 4th, we're going to have a public forum on the budget. We'll have a meet the candidates night, and then on May 17th, annual election budget vote. So I'll stop right here. We're concluded for the evening. Does anybody have any additional questions from the board or for me? Questions?
I would just like to say that if the board does have any questions lingering, please get them in before our next meeting. And I ask our community, watching, to do the same, to get those in. And I know there is the address up on the screen, communications@ncom.org. If you have any questions, please get them in sometime before April 11th. Because at that time, we are going to propose budget.
Ms. Gilgio, do we have any questions from the community? No questions from the community. Ryan, did we have online audience? So that's great. Okay, so that's a little more than the town. Okay. All right.
A lot of information, and it's all really good stuff. This is why we're here. So, thank you to everyone who presented tonight. Thank you, Jill, Kathy, for good work. I know we got to cancel on Monday, but well, we're doing, we have a lot of stuff. That we have a first-hand recipient of all your good.
Ms. Nardoro, I would like to thank all of our staff that presented this evening. I'd like to thank Bogart, Pio, for your ability to be here this evening. Thank Denise, Mr. Stein, Phillips, Mr. Barton, all here to help support Ms. Scriven, not only advancing the slides here, but also for the support should you have any technology-based questions here as well. So, again, thanks to all. Thanks to my central office team, always for your wonderful work, support of our mission, and have a good evening.
Since I think everyone has been thanked, I'll take a motion to be budget and adjourn. Mr. Llewellyn, Mr. Shannon, and all in favor. Thank you very much.